Okay. Oh, we're going. That took a while to get going. Okay, so hello everyone, and also while I'm at it, happy Halloween. If I'm not wearing a witch's hat or a vampire's cape, didn't feel I needed to. Anyway, this is the second last interview in this series, so 5, and my next interviewee will hopefully next week. Still working Thursday or not the Thursday, Saturday or Sunday. So anyway, today I have the host of the GenealCymru channel. I know he's going to correct me. Forgot that wrong. It's Davies.
Hello.
And this will work. Hello, Di.
Hello. No, you did great. Davies of GenealCymru. You got it perfect.
Great. Well, that's Wordle. Just broken down. I mean that's actually the hardest bit, is making sure it's the name right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's get in. So for anyone watching that might not necessarily know you, Di, could you introduce yourself?
Okay. Well, as I said, and as you said, my name is Davies. I run the YouTube channel GenealCymru. My work background as a genealogist, I actually come from an academic background. So I have a bachelor's and a master's in anthropology. I also did 6 years of a PhD in anthropology prior to this. And what I focused on there was identity and structural violence. So that's where my research was focused. And I did a lot of research on space and place, migration, community care, all things that I think are really relevant to genealogy. And so that's where I come to genealogy from, with these things in mind. And just to explain what anthropology is for anyone who might not know, because many people do not know, we basically look at people's everyday experiences. And then, we look at people's everyday experiences and then look at how through those experiences and practices, people create social meaning. And so we also look at that in terms of like the role that power plays in these social meanings, social hierarchies, and things like that. So that's kind of how I come to genealogy. And so I'm focusing on like the small things that our ancestors experienced and looking at how those small things kind of can tell us about how they fit into a larger society, how they fit into history, how they fit into different power structures. And the kind of hill that I will die on as a genealogist is that genealogy needs to produce knowledge that responds to the world that we're living in today. Cool stories are nice. Cool stories about old dead people are really awesome. But I don't think that's quite enough. And so we need to start taking those stories and using them to figure out what's going on now. Like, there's so many things happening in the world. We're in a world of multiple crises that are happening. And so just kind of thinking about how genealogy can contribute to that. So that's kind of like what I'm doing. That's where I'm at with the YouTube. I also do educational stuff on the YouTube as well. But yeah, that's kind of where the focus is leading us to, looking at the ways that genealogy can tell us about gender, about colonialism, about police and state violence, about identity, all these different types of things. Yeah.
Fair enough. So quite an array, I think, is kind of where you're going with it.
Yeah.
Judging by that. Listen. Fair.
Thanks.
So,
also,
what's there? Oh, go Fred.
Oh, sorry about that. I also forgot to mention like my background in terms of who my ancestors are. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. So with the name of my YouTube channel, GenealCymru, Genial comes from genealogy. Cymru is the Welsh word for Wales. And so we're starting with like the Welsh context, but also um, there's a lot of important things that we talk about there that are applicable universally. But my ancestors, I kind of think of them in 4 different groups. So there's like the Welsh village tradespeople who are like carpenters and blacksmiths. Another part of my family are rural Welsh Baptist mid-scale farmers. They were parts of the literary class in Wales. They were religious leaders and things like that. Then I've got another group of ancestors who come from Devon or were in urban Wales, who did migrant laborer work or worked in factories. And then my last group of ancestors are through my grandma, who were early settlers to Canada and possibly the States that came here in the 1700s from Germany and France, and maybe from England. They were like fisher people and boat builders. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that much. It's a bit more interesting than mine. That they come from different places. Mine just stayed in the part of Mayo and Waterford, but I've ranted on about that in many other videos. So if that they can go there, but that's all I'll say. It's just stayed in the one place. It didn't really move. So,
Yeah.
anyway, with that out of the way, well, from my perspective, not really yours. So how did you get into genealogy? What started it all off for you?
There were kind of a couple different things happening that got me into genealogy. The first thing was my Grampy's stories. My Grampy was always a really good storyteller, and he grew up in Swansea in South Wales. He was born in the 1930s. So his childhood, he grew up in an urban center during World War II. So just sharing all of that and always talking about his experiences, spending time with his uncle and with his other family members. There were just stories that I was always interested in hearing, and he was always interested and wanting to tell them as well. And it kind of contributed to this like longing that happens in my family. Like a lot of us long for Wales. Like it's a place that we come from. Well, almost all of us come from. My grandma, like I said, is from Canada. And we long for it. And that kind of longing makes me want to find these ancestors and makes me want to make connections with them. And I didn't really start doing that seriously until the beginning of 2020. But I've been working on it every day since, and it's been really good for me. It's been making me very happy.
Well, that's good. I mean, there will be times when you decide to see the jokes that kind of are sort of the cartoons or jokes. Oh, I yeah. So at that rate, it would have been like a pandemic project for you, really.
It actually started before the pandemic. Well, not
project.
technically. Before the pandemic kind of crystallized as a big thing for me and people in like Canada. But yeah, it's given me a lot of time to work on it, being inside all the time.
Fair enough. It gives you something to do. So what better way to spend your time than doing video? I can think of other things that I could do, but to be honest, they're never as appealing.
Yeah.
I need homework.
Homework. That's important. Do your homework.
In life, yay.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's just this year I don't like. So, what resources have you found most helpful in your research?
Um, Obviously, the big paid websites are a help for having all of the a lot of the primary sources. But the one place that has really pushed my genealogy work to the next level is the National Library of Wales website. They have, and I've been doing a lot of advertising for them in my videos, but they have millions of digitized newspaper and journal articles that are free to access. And I have been accessing them quite a bit. Um, I They have the national the excuse me, the newspapers, they have the journals, they also have wills, and then they have just like an assortment of things from their archives that they've digitized. They've got tons of photographs, and just being able to go in and find the actual stories of my ancestors, of instances of them speaking for themselves, or just random little things that they had put in the newspaper or that were put in the newspaper about them, has really just made this come alive for me.
I can imagine. Like, I mean, I like for now. Not many of my ancestors it happens to, and also for the people who are asking, where's the light? As you can tell, I've forgotten it again, so I'll do that next week. Anyway, so there, like for one of my great grandparents, there was actually quite a bit in the paper for him because he was kind of one of the local figures, that sort of thing, in his community, and kind of because written about him, it was kind of nice because you can kind of piece together kind of what happened when, and as it could, so and so, Dan Fraher sponsored this, Dan Fraher sponsored that, and it's little pieces. And the kind of favorite bit for me is kind of well, at the moment I say it's my favorite. It's actually a pain because I'm not going to go into the full story. I've gone on about this and many other ones. So like, I definitely went over it in Lisa Buckner's one, just this story anyway. So with this ancestor in particular, he was jailed twice. First time in Waterford, which is where he was from, because he came back from GAA conference in Dublin and was he was imprisoned for a couple of weeks for like causing a bit of a ruckus.
Yeah, I've got some of those.
Yeah, and the other time, now annoyingly there is paper coverage on this one, but he had 2 years in County Down, and for people who don't know where County Down is, it's in Northern Ireland. It's up the top of the country, so or up top of the island even. Sorry, I'm confused. And it just he was in a prison called Ballykinlar prison in County Down, and all that I could ever find was it was, quote, from an ordeal from which he never recovered. And what that ordeal is, I can never figure out what it is. And I'm annoyed because I just keep seeing that phrase repeated, and it's just infuriating. So I want to know what he did, but he ended up 2 years in the slammer for. But I mean, and he wasn't like a young person here. He was in his 70s. Like he died aged 77, and I think he was like 74, and he was there for 2 years.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know, but I'm hoping to find out what happened one day. But
yeah, you'll figure it out. It'll take some time.
Yeah, I mean, it might have something to do with the fact that his son-in-law was had a bit of an involvement in the Irish War of Independence, so that might have had to do with it. Oh boy. So what projects or ventures are you doing? Because obviously we know one, which is GenealCymru, your YouTube channel. Is there any other bit?
That's kind of the focus right now. And it's just it's a lot of learning because like coming from an academic background, we're taught to like write and give like public speaking engagements. But we're never really trained to match images to our words. So now doing videos, like that is the thing that I'm really interested in learning about and figuring out how to do better, is how to match images to the things that I'm saying, to the stories that I'm saying. So that's really cool. There is also like within my genealogy work, I have room to take on genealogy clients. If anyone has any Welsh ancestors they'd like me to find, just let me know and you can pay me to do it. But I've been mostly working on my Welsh ancestors. I also have a bit of a one name study on the go. And it's kind of a weird one name study because the surname is Davis, but if I was to trace every Davis in Wales, I would be working for hundreds of years because there's just so many.
I was just about to say, you say it's kind of a strange name, but in Wales it's like Smith or the O'Sullivan of Ireland.
Exactly. But the kind of odd bit is that it's a one name study of the first name. So the person I started with, or who's at the center of this, and my friends, who some of whom are probably watching right now, are very familiar with this person, but the Reverend Timothy Davis. And Timothy is not a very common name. And in this area of Wales, everyone who's named Timothy is descended from one of two families. And I started working on this because one of those families I'm actually related to, because I have this Timothy in my tree, he is the grandson of my 7 times great grandparents. And he was born in Lampeter, in southwest Wales. And so his name was Timothy, but I only knew about him from his father's will, which didn't really say anything about him other than he existed. So I actually found that my 7 times great grandmother is descended from one of these Timothy Davis families. Not the one that goes back to like 1500, unfortunately, but she's related to this family. So I've been kind of tracing Timothy as a name all across Wales, and all of the roads keep leading back to these two families. So that's been really interesting, and I've been enjoying that. I also am doing a bit of a one-place study for a village or a community in Jamaica, because one of my loved ones is from or his ancestors are from that part of Jamaica, and just kind of every once in a while going back to it and doing work to find out more about this place and about the lives of his ancestors.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And also, sorry.
You're fine. I'd like to say someone that commented, Alison Odger. Thank you. Sorry, Alison. So she says, "Hello, yes, I am well aware of Timothy." So I think there are some people who do know who you're referring to. Go ahead before I interrupt you.
One thing that actually came out today, speaking about things that like current projects, I submitted a story to the From Paper to People podcast, and she put out an episode today that has one of me telling a story about one of my less than good ancestors. So go check that out, From Paper to People podcast. Yeah.
And funny enough, I was actually starting to listen to that episode today. I got about halfway through it. I haven't got to yours yet. I think it was halfway through. I've forgotten now, but I haven't gotten to your bit, so I will be listening to it when I'm making the graphic for next week's guest. But more. So, is there anything that you know or learned now to started?
I think the most important thing is how to be organized in going through all of these records. Just like I've been saving copies, like screenshotting or downloading copies of every record that talks about my ancestors. I have like 18,000 records, and if I had known how to keep them really organized at the beginning, I wouldn't be in the place that I am now, kind of having to go back and do more work. I actually have a video about how I'm doing that, so if anyone wants to check out how to be organized, or at least how I do it. But the other thing is, like if you find a census record, just having a space in your tree, wherever that tree is, for every piece of information that you can extract from it. So one of the things that I wasn't doing at the beginning that I'm doing now is taking note of everyone's occupation. Normally, I was just taking note of people who had like actual jobs, but one of the things with the old records is that they normally didn't record women's work, or they recorded women's work as just farmer's wife and the children as farmer's child or as scholar for them being in school.
Yeah,
I've been going back. Yeah. And I've been going back to add all of that extra information into, well, it's not extra information, it's just information I hadn't been recording and putting that into my tree, because I started noticing, oh, not all of my ancestors were actually maybe going to school, or some of them were going to school and being scholars for longer than others. That's important information. So that's a big thing. Mm-hmm.
No, it is definitely. And just going back to your point about your video, I have linked Dais' channel in the description. I'm saying like every YouTuber. I'm trying to sound different, but anyway, just look in the description. It's all there. So look there, and all your questions will be answered. And one thing while I'm, if anything they'd like me to ask, please stick them in the comments, and I will ask them later. I forget to mention that earlier on, hence why I'm doing it now. So, what aspect of genealogy do you love the most? Like finding old records, seeing mentions in newspapers, looking at photos, that sort of thing.
I think for me, it's really the stories. And I think a lot of people had that same answer that you've interviewed. It's really about finding the details that turn them into real people. Because it's so easy to like look at these records and be like, oh, they're a name and a date. And they don't really feel real until you get into like, well, for our ancestors that are in the newspapers or in the journals, or finding something like a diary, or even finding, I have what picture is it of? It's an old photograph that is from my great-grandmother, and it must have been used as like a note, just as like a, because in the old days when there were no telephones, people would send postcards and stuff, or would write a note and pass it along or leave it at someone's house. That's what this photograph was actually used for. And so we can see on the back of this photograph that she and her brother-in-law are making plans to go to church or to hang out on one day, or that she needs a cup of sugar when she goes for grocery shopping. So just like those kind of really personal and detailed things that we can find. And the other really important thing to me is finding continuity in these stories. So finding a story that just feels really familiar. And I talked about it on Twitter a bit before, but like one of the generational gifts that I've noticed coming down through my family is that like I come from a lot of people who just made stuff. So like on one side, them being blacksmiths and carpenters, coming down for like 200 years of doing stuff like that. And then seeing my mom and my grampy build things and create things and find something that they need in the house or that would make life easier, and then just going and making it. And I have, here's our one Halloween connection for the day. I have a photograph of my Halloween costume from one year that my mom made me.
Oh,
Hopefully
that's
you can
really
see it.
good.
I'm the Welsh dragon. Um, so yeah, my mom just like made these. I have another picture. She made my brother's outfit too. Let's see, my brother is a bunny, I think.
That's great.
But yeah, just like seeing people make things and then me making things and kind of taking that energy and putting it into something like YouTube, where it's all about creativity and creating something beautiful from these stories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, something I need to improve on. And I mean, I've said it once in the previous one, but I'll say it again. You know, Natalie's Curious Descendants and Amy Johnson Crow's 52 Ancestors. Like, it's something I need to try and do when I have time.
Yeah.
Because like I'm in Amy's Facebook group for Generations Cafe, and she posts up, you know, the weekly prompt saying week 43. I forgot what it is. Oh no. Oh, that's not good.
That's okay.
And like she'll put out the prompts, and it's just thinking, oh, I really need to do that. And I know it's like, you know, oh, well, you can do it anytime you want. And I'm thinking, I know, but I'll never do it if I don't do it like that week. But no, I mean, it's just those bits to try and help you write, which is what I'm trying to do, because not that long ago I was showing family members a kind of a family tree again because they hadn't seen it in a while, and quite a bit of change. Thanks to Wiki Tree and everyone there. So they were delighted with the updates to it as well.
Nice.
So it was just trying to show them all that, and it kind of occurred to me that I didn't really have much about them. It was just mainly stories that they had about them. Well, from what they could either remember or recall, because some of my like great grandparents weren't around when they were born, so I don't know, but bit by bit.
But with things like that, I mean, sometimes those kind of challenges, like weekly writing prompts and things like that, get a bit overwhelming. Just like sit down for 15 minutes and put a timer on and just like write some stuff. And do it like on the weekend or something. Just like low stakes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to finish it. Just like 15 minutes and you're good.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It is something I need to do, and I'll try and take that on board.
Yeah.
I need to take that on board, ideally. Because I've said I'll do it, and the next thing I know, I don't end up doing it. So, yeah, one day. So, what's an interesting story or event that you've discovered about your ancestors?
It kind of speaks to the one I was thinking of is actually the first newspaper article that I found from the National Library of Wales website. And it was the first one, and I had been searching and just I found I found the words of my ancestors, and it was really impactful. And I just want to do a quick like trigger warning. It's not a happy story. I'm going to mention abuse, but like domestic abuse, but I'm not going to go into any detail or anything. But that is a part of the story. So just be aware of that. But it was a newspaper article. It was a court case about it was a bigamy trial. So someone had got married twice when they weren't supposed to. And so my 4 times great-grandfather's sister was named Eliza Davis. And she, in the 1830s, got married to this man who was an apprentice for her brother, who was a hat maker. And so they got married, and he like immediately ran off to another. I think he ran off to Swansea from Llandybia, which is the village that they lived in South Wales. So he ran off, and he'd come back every once in a while. He eventually went to England and got married again. And then 5 years later, probably after his new wife found out, he went back to Llandybia and moved back in with Eliza. And so in 1847, Eliza's brother, Jacob Davis, who is my 4 times great-grandfather, takes him to court. There's this part in the article where Jacob is testifying, and he just starts off and says, "I am a blacksmith living at White Mill, Llandybia." And I read that, and like I could have cried, because just seeing that like little bit of like, oh, my ancestor is saying I am this person and I live here, and then going on to talk about like his experiences, it was just like really meaningful. And so he was taking his brother-in-law to court because of this, the bigamy. He also was in a number of fights with his brother-in-law, saying things like, "How could you look me in the face knowing that you've treated my sister in this way?" And he was in a fight in a public house with him. And it just all felt really familiar, because I know that my grampy did similar things for his relatives who were in abusive relationships, going and confronting that person. And it just kind of felt like there was this continuity of like we protect our own kind of thing, protect our loved ones and be there for them when they need. And like in the end, it's not a super eventful court case. It's like one of those things that happens and then people forget about it, in the papers at least. But the guy ends up getting put in jail for 2 more weeks. He had already been there for a month up until that point. And they decided to give him such a light sentence because of my 4 times great-grandfather, who they accused of taking him to court because of like a personal vendetta. They said, "Oh, Jacob is just being malicious by bringing this to court." So they like lessened his sentence. And the other thing that like came out of this article that I really liked is that like no one knew about Eliza up until this point. Like all of the ancestry trees that talked about this, or that had this part of my family, they didn't have Eliza. So she didn't like register for anyone in the records until I found this newspaper article. And like one of the things that I really enjoy doing in genealogy is focusing on women's stories and finding women in the records, because I find that so often people don't do that. And there's just this assumption that I guess that women in the past don't have stories, or that it's too hard to find their stories. It's too hard to find their maiden names and things like that. And just Eliza's story as well, all she wanted was someone to keep the peace. That's what Jacob said she wanted. She just wanted someone to keep the peace. And I really was able to empathize with that desire that she had, because of my own personal experiences of being in relationships and abuse and things like that. So it was just really meaningful, and it was a moment where I was able to connect on this emotional level, on this like empathetic level with these people who have been dead for 150 years, right? So yeah.
Fair enough. And I mean, I do agree with you on I'm trying to find the women's stories, because I mean, you know, it's often I've seen the reference in genealogy as, you know, the forgotten people kind of genealogy, and they are kind of, because it's typically the men that are, remembered and so like noted probably more than the women would. And I mean, and I do again agree with you with the fact about the maiden name. I mean, I think it's like my 3 times great grandmother on my paternal grandmother's side. I think anyway. I'm probably wrong. Hopefully, no.
She's up there
Yeah,
somewhere.
I'm actually wrong. It's on my paternal grandfather's side. I tend to get that bit wrong. Where it's just I have Pat Burke and Mary.
Mm.
And Pat Burke in Mayo is not very rare. So I literally went sifting down through a load of records, hoping I'll find it, and I the place where they were living was listed as the death place, and a couple of other bits that corroborated with it that made it right, and it said, I think it was I found the husband's death cert, which meant it was before then because he was listed as a widower. So then I just went looking, and I eventually found one that lined up again with the details that I had. So
Nice.
I still don't know her maiden name, but I know her name is Mary. Although to be honest,
Yeah.
I probably could have guessed that one, considering that's practically all the daughters are ever named is either Mary or Bridget. So,
Yeah.
well. I have one name. I'm 50% there, so that's the main thing.
Yeah, you'll figure it out eventually. And I mean, like, there was one case in my family tree, my 5 times great grandmother. All I knew that was that her name was Hannah. So Hannah married to David Davis. So like I thought there was no chance of me finding her, and I kind of I kind of just like lost all hope, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna be okay with you being named Hannah. I'll probably never find anything else. But then I was able to find their son's death announcement in the papers, and so I ended up tracing him to living with it was one of her son who was living with their other son, and I didn't know about this other son because he was born before they got married. Luckily, they sent him off to live with her brother and his wife in another town. So I was able to trace that child of theirs who was born before they were married and found her brother. Luckily, her brother was named Watkin Walters, and Hannah had a son named Watkin and had a son named Walter. So it just everything lined up perfectly, and all of a sudden, I've got this Hannah Walters, and then I found her parents, and then I found her mother's father, and just like hundreds of their descendants. So it only takes one small thing to break through that brick wall sometimes.
I like that methodology though.
Mm-hmm. You got to go around. It's twisty.
Yeah. Oh, it's never easy. Another comment in there that I am very, very lucky and happy that women in the Netherlands always keep their maiden name. That's
cool.
kind of handy. I have to say, when it comes to find the people that are quite evasive. So, what? No. What record do you like? Did I ask that one? What type of record did you?
Nope, that's what we're on.
What? Oh, fine. Yeah. I'm my friend. This isn't good. So what type of record do you like the most and why?
My favorite are wills. I love finding a will. As I said earlier, through the National Library of Wales website, they have all of the pre-1858 wills for free online. You can also get them through Ancestry, although the quality indexing is on National Library of Wales website. Wills, I don't know what it is about them, but finding a will, I think it's that like in a lot of them, they'll just be like, I have all of this wealth and I give it to my daughter so and so, my son so and so, my other daughter. Sometimes I'll give it to my nephew, my cousin. It's just like so many people can come out of these records. And like, because they go back so far and have so many names in them, like they are key to working on pre 1840s Wales genealogy, in my mind. There is a problem with that, though, and it is that only people who had things were writing wills at that time.
Yeah.
So if you have ancestors who were like migrant laborers or they were just poor farmers, chances are you won't find a will, or domestic servants or something like that. Chances are you're not going to find a will. And that's kind of like really hurt my research because wills have been really great for that one part of my family who are the mid-sized land or mid-sized farmers and literary class and religious class, but no one else has wills. So I've been able to take that one particular part of my family quite far back, and I have a lot of detail for them, but everyone else just didn't really have anything to pass down. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately the one thing that very few, if any, of my family actually did have, and that was a will. It would probably help me a lot because on my paternal great grandmother's side, I literally have her, two sisters, it's like five brothers. Or no, definitely more than that. At least six actually. Two died. So actually, yeah, five living, but two died. And it's only through the sister. One of the sisters had definitely had kids, and the other one looked to emigrate to New York and died a spinster. She doesn't look to marry, and I cannot find any other. Like I can't find any emigration or stuff for any of the other brothers, and that part is just very. What's the word? Lacking.
Yeah.
With it's just like it just stops with some, and then it actually grows out and branches out with more, with others. So I mean, one day
One
I'm
day.
really hoping because that's the one part that is actually, and I'm hoping that
Yeah.
one day something will kind of like, oh well, this came. Have a look at this, but don't quite know. So, what does genealogy mean to you?
I think for me, it's really been about healing. I started when I did, because I wanted something to like accompany healing in my life. Like it's healing through reconnecting with family that has been lost. Lost in terms of like some of them I know their stories from what my grampy had to tell me, but also like growing up in a urban center, impoverished, like stories are gonna get lost, because like people are struggling and trying to find scrap metal to sell, to put food on the table and things like that. And so it's been really about reconnecting with these ancestors. It's also healing through it being like the past being like a fantasy world. Things are tough these days for everyone. Well, maybe not everyone, but for a lot of people. And having this genealogy work to go into as if it's like a fantasy world to take me elsewhere has been really great and has been really healing in a time like this, especially. And it's just like, it feels like the ultimate exercise of creativity, which, as I said before, is something that I love, to be creative, and just taking all of these like little bits of data and creating these like complex webs and then to come to conclusions. It's like one of the best like mind exercises for me. It just makes me really happy. Um, and also just like being able to find those stories and find these continuities and like look at my own life and be like, oh, this is where this thing comes from. It comes from these people who were doing it repeatedly for hundreds of years, has been like really healing in terms of like explaining why my life is the way it is and why I am the person that I am today, and how I relate to others in the world in the way that I do.
Yeah, and I do agree with kind of, trying to find stories because, I mean, on one side of my family, they're like on my mother's side, like all her aunts and uncles are gone, and I mean, there there wasn't. I mean, so my grandmother was one of four. Three of the four had kids, and one of them is she aged 22, so she sadly didn't live very long. And one thing that I found even just close, like she's my grandaunt, excuse me, and my mom's aunt, and nobody knows her birthday,
Mm.
and like it's that close. And I mean, it just kind of you know and like only like the eldest cousin who I forget how old he is. He's no, I can't think of it. But like he he would tell me stories about this granddad. Of course, I would have never known that he would have heard from his father and his aunts and his aunt and uncle. Um, the aunt being my grandmother. Um, about her, and it was just really nice because at the end she died of tuberculosis. So,
Mm-hmm.
and at near the end of her life, they kind of built like not so much. It wasn't really a shed, but it was just kind of like a place for her, and like because it was kind of the way it was at the time, um, like she's just kind of blocked off from like seeing family or something, like because of the because of tuberculosis,
Yeah.
and they didn't want to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so sad because like the they could only practically wave at her or talk to her from a distance or something. And I mean, it's just hard. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of one of the few stories I've actually heard about her, and it was the hardest one to hear. Um, but I mean, and like this, she died in 1947, so that was 74 years ago. So
Yeah.
like it's not even been a century, and not much about her is remembered. There's a few photos of her, but
Mm.
nothing large.
Yeah.
Um, and because there was a bit of an age gap, the eldest boy was born in 1922, and my grandmother was born in 1936. I always say 1934, but I'm thinking of another person. Um, so, like, the eldest would have been 14 when she was born. And her sister, May, who died in 1947, she would have been 11.
Mm-hmm.
So she lost her at age 11. And at age 5, she lost her mother.
Yeah.
And I mean, kind of family was it was a bit difficult to talk about, from what I've heard, because of, the death and kind of, the sadness.
Yeah.
Like it can be hard to even kind of recount it because it might bring up something they didn't want to talk about. And I mean, I
Yeah.
totally understand it because I mean, you lose 2 members of your family, 2 members of 6 in the duration of 6 years. And I mean, it ain't easy.
Yeah.
Kind of hearing
And
about it.
and that's like part of the healing as well. Like, how does a family deal with that? And what are, like, that's a traumatic experience. And so like what are the ways that they dealt with that they then passed down to your parent, and then to you? Like, how does that continue down to you? And the same thing, like I was saying with Eliza Davis, with the bigamy trial earlier, like, I see after generation of women getting into abusive relationships. And like, why is that? Like, how do we deal with that now? How do we break these kind of cycles? Like, maybe in your family, I'm just making things up, but I would figure like there's probably some like fear around like losing people, or people leaving and then not coming back. And so like, how do we deal with that in the present, these things that have been brought down to us?
Yeah, and I mean, it does obviously take time, as you
Yeah,
know. It's
absolutely.
not an instant thing that can happen. So,
Yeah.
again, for anyone watching, I am getting near the end of my questions. So, if you want to ask Guy anything, please get it in now. So, what now? We're getting on to probably the bits where I've seen you talk about a bit on Twitter. So, what advice would you give to a young starting out in genealogy?
I thought about this for a while, and I had a couple different ideas, but I think the most important one is stop waiting until you feel prepared. Stop waiting for that moment when you feel prepared to do it the right way. Just like, do it. Just go for it. Like, there's never going to be a time when you know that you feel that you know enough to be able to start, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So just like, do it. Like, all of the voices that are telling you that you're not knowledgeable enough, that you're not prepared enough, that you're not organized enough, that you're not enough in general, they're all liars. And like, tell them that. Tell those voices that. Because like, once you start doing something like genealogy, you'll find knowledge, you'll come to organization, and you'll eventually find out, hopefully, that you've always been enough, which is the great thing about just like doing it, right? So yeah, like, stop worrying. If you're worrying about doing it right or not, just like, it's gonna be okay. Just do it. Like, don't worry if you're doing it right or not right. Just do it. Worry about doing it. And that's kind of advice that goes for everything. And I think the other thing is like having friends who will give you honest feedback and who will celebrate with you each other's achievements, as no matter how small they are, is just so important. And the sappy part is, I wouldn't be able to do any of this without the support of my friends and family. Like, just knowing that there are people, that I have a handful of people who will just celebrate with me, whatever it is, and who trust me to celebrate with them for what they're doing, is just like, it's just the best.
Yeah.
So find those. If you don't have those people, find those people. Because I mean, I didn't have that for a very long time. I'm the person growing up who had no friends. And like, it's tough, but you'll find yourself in a place where those people are finally there. And it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah. And obviously, with more and more young people getting into genealogy, do you, in your opinion, think that there is a sufficient outlet for young genealogists to collaborate, like communicate, any of that?
Well, I think from our conversations, I think we both know the answer is no. Um, and I think it's just, it's a Yeah.
I'm staying out of it.
I think that like creating spaces is going to be a lot of the work for young genealogists. I count myself within being a young genealogist. I'm 29. I'm young. I'm not as young as you, but I'm also not the age as like most of the people doing genealogy, who many of whom are in their 50s and 60s, and older than that. So I'm kind of like in this in between space. But I think that one of the really important things about like bringing young people to genealogy, or making genealogy worthwhile to young people, is answering the question of why should genealogy be important to young people, or speaking directly to young people out there, like what is important to you, and what do you stand for, and how could you use genealogy to help fulfill those things for you. Like the great thing about family history is that if you don't like history, you might not like history, but you might be interested in your own family history, just like building that personal connection with these like wide historical processes that people are talking about all the time. Like, where do your family members fit into all of that? And where do you fit into all of that? Because these little stories are just as important as understanding these like wider processes, right? Like migration is a big thing to understand. And you may not be interested in researching migration, but where did your people move to? What happened there? Why did they move? What were they looking for? What were they escaping? Things like that. And so, yeah, I think it's just that, like creating spaces that acknowledge that young people have things that are important to us slash them, that young people are interested in making the world a better place. How can we use genealogy to do that? Because a lot of young people are, everyone's living in a time of crisis. Growing older, growing through your youth and into adulthood is in crisis at this time. So, like, how could we learn from our ancestors how to do that and how to survive that and thrive in that? I think that's a thing to think about for young genealogists.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, no, I forgot the point. Damn it.
That's okay.
Oh,
I said a lot of things.
yeah, no, I had something in my head I was gonna say and I've forgotten it. Fine.
That's okay.
Anyway, so it doesn't look as if any questions are popping in. So I think with that we shall end. So thank you so much, Di, for popping on and
Thank
giving a
you.
fabulous interview. And thank you to the people who watched this. And my finale of season 4 will finish next week, and I will obviously say this again next week, but I don't know. When I'll be doing another series, it may still be June time, late June time. This is a busy year ahead of me after Christmas, especially. So this is kind of going to be, well, next week is definitely going to be the definite finale, and I don't know when the next one will be. So until then, stay tuned with whatever happens with me and Di, and we will see you next week. Well, I will see. Sorry,
Yeah. I'll be here watching.
Oh dear. I don't know why I'm like this today. It's just weird.
You're
Anyway,
doing great.
thanks. See you next week, everyone.